What's going on YouTube? It's Tej back again with another video, and today I'm giving you a fatal flaw for all 16 AFC teams as we head into the 2022-2023 NFL season. Excited to bring this your way, and hopefully you all enjoy today's video. If you do, be sure to hit that like button and help me out a ton. If you're new around here, want to see more football content as we get closer and closer to the regular season, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. And there's no right or wrong answer to this exercise, so give me your fatal flaws for each of these teams down below in the comment section, or maybe your favorite team if it's included in this. I'm also going to be doing the 16 NFC teams here later this week. So if your favorite team's not in this, be sure to come back for that video. But very simple exercise. I already did a reason for optimism for all 32 teams. One video for the AFC, one video for the NFC. So let's get into some fatal flaws. I tried not to be, too obvious. You could say quarterback for just about any team because that's the position that has the most, dictation on where your team is going to go. I'll try to think outside the box at least a little bit. But let's jump into it, starting with the AFC East, the Buffalo Bills. So this is as good a team on paper as there is in the NFL. Even in my reasons for optimism, I put best roster. At least in the AFC, I think they do have the best roster in that conference, and maybe even the entire NFL. Them and the Bucs feel like they're 1 and 2, or at least 1A, 1B. But the one weakness where you do concern in years past, maybe it's been the pass rush, but you bring in Von Miller, you got to trust somebody of that pedigree, future Hall of Famer. He'll give you a boost there. My concern's really in the secondary, right? So for a couple of different reasons. One, Tre'Davious White, the man on the screen, coming off an injury, so there's no guarantee you're going to hit that same, all-pro level type of play. I do like the selection of Kyer Elam. Levi Wallace was a solid player in a, very zone-heavy defense. He did the job Sean McDermott asked of him. Can Kyer Elam do that? He was more of a man-press guy based off my scouting, what I kind of saw in him, but I'm a big Kyer Elam fan. I think there's some flexibility there. Has the, the size, the speed, has everything you want in a quarter or corner. Just needs to be coached up for what McDermott is looking for. But still, starting a rookie cornerback comes with some concerns there. And then I think Teron Johnson's a good, solid nickel corner. But what happens if Tre'Davious White gets hurt again? Or what if Kyer Elam can't stay on the field? Or is a rookie and has a hard time out there? Who is that other boundary corner? That's concerning. And for a team that's going to air it out on the offensive side, the defense is going to see the field a fair amount because that offense is going to pour up points, and maybe that makes the job a little easier. But it also, you score quick, the defense is get back out there quick, right? So my other concern with the secondary depth is Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde are maybe the best safety duo in the NFL. That's up for debate. But that being said, we haven't really seen the Bills without, one of those two guys on the field. So what happens if something happens to Micah Hyde? Or what if Jordan Poyer goes down with an injury? Or whatever the case may be. What is that, next guy up? What does that look like? I'm not saying it's going to be good or it's going to be bad. We just haven't seen it. So because of that, there is always just a little bit of concern and okay, well, that's an awesome duo. That's a huge strength, but what happens if it's altered or, you have to change plans because of, injuries or whatever may come their way. So the secondary could be the one thing that holds the Bills back from potentially getting to the Super Bowl and maybe even winning it. So that's, in my opinion, their fatal flaw. And let me get to the Dolphins. Sorry, this one's an obvious one. This one and the Jets one, we'll go ahead and hit them both right here. Tua and Zach Wilson. I mean, these are two teams that have done so much in the team building process to be able to put the offense and skill position players around these quarterbacks. For Tua, it's you have Jalen Waddle going into year 2, you make the trade for Tyreek Hill, you're bringing back Mike Gesicki, you also sign Cedric Wilson, you fix up the offensive line the best you can, you sign a Connor Williams, a Teron Armstead. Things are looking good there in Miami. And for the Jets, it's drafting a Garrett Wilson in the top 10. It's year 2 of Elijah Moore. It's trying to revitalize that offensive line. But also year 2 of Michael LaFleur as an offensive coordinator. And then for Miami, it's bringing in Mike McDaniel, who's going to be the play caller there. So both these teams have taken a huge amount of emphasis and onus on we have got to improve the situation around these quarterbacks to see and to hopefully elevate their play and get them to where we think they should be or where we need them to be. So the pressure has to be on them, right? The team did their part. The front offices put together good supporting cast. Now Tua's got to be able to show it. Now Zach Wilson's got to be able to show it. I'm a little more optimistic about Zach Wilson, right? He's going into year 2, and he's just got that natural big play about him. He showcased that a ton at BYU. For Tua, though, it's interesting because, that Mike McDaniel system, obviously, a disciple of the Kyle Shanahan offense, which, made Jimmy Garoppolo, a guy who was playing in the Super Bowl just a handful of years ago. So can Tua do something similar, right? Can he be good enough? Can he operate that short underneath game? Can he get the ball in the hands of dynamic playmakers like a Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki, Tyreek Hill, so on and so forth? So I'm not ruling either one of those two out, but they are what will dictate this upcoming season. And if Tua falls short of expectation, of Zach Wilson proves to be, a disappointing pick at number 2 overall, these two teams are not going to hit the highs that they're hoping to hit this year. And then for the Patriots, I kind of cheated here, but I'll focus more on the secondary. But perimeter talent, I'm talking about wide receivers, I'm talking about corners. So for wide receivers, they just don't have that alpha. And, for years now, we've been saying, the Pats need that number one guy, dating back, more than half a decade now. Once Julio Jones starts to get his name in trade rumors, the Pats were always linked because that was always a need. Here we are coming into next season. And they still don't have an alpha, but Jacoby Myers is a really nice big slot, and Kendrick Bourne was solid last year, and you bring in a Devontae Parker. So there's no alpha, but they have 4 or 5 guys that are fine to be out in the field. So I'm really going to focus my attention here on the secondary, right? So you bring back Malcolm Butler, he's the guy in the picture there, and great, awesome. He's hopefully him and Matt Patricia have put together or put aside their troubled past, that led to him being benched in the Super Bowl, but. He's also a man press. He was the archetype of a cornerback for what Bill Belichick has done in the past. But last year, you started to see some more zone. And you look at Malcolm Butler as your 1, Jalen Mills as your 2, and then I like Marcus Jones as a 3rd-round pick, but that's a nickel corner given his size. So is this team going to be running more zone? And if so, what does that mean for Malcolm Butler? Because that's not really something he's been asked to do a whole lot of, and might not be as good at. We just don't know yet. So I'm fascinated to see what this cornerback room looks like, and if it's still that man, the background that Bill Belichick has, and that's still the emphasis on the defensive side, is Jalen Mills ready to take on that type of workload? And is he really ready to take on that type of role? Is Malcolm Butler still the guy who can be a number 1 corner? I don't know. Even that gives me concern. So one way or another, I'm really fascinated to see one comes out of that cornerback room. And this is a Patriots team that has pass rush and has some guys who can get to the quarterback, but it's not, elite by any stretch or anything like that. So they don't have an Aaron Donald who's a game record. They don't have, a pass rush with, like Pittsburgh with a Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, 2 of the best doing it at their respective positions. It's just it's a solid pass rush. So what does that mean for this cornerback group? Are they going to be transitioning more to zone? How does Malcolm Butler fit into that? And overall, does that limit big plays? Are they going to truly just go full forward with this bend but don't break system? Hey, we'll let you get inside the red zone, but from that point on where you're settling for 3? I don't know, but I'm fascinated to see it. So let's move on to our next division. That's the AFC South. So the Texans, right, this is obviously an imperfect roster, and it's a team that's far away from winning. Them, the Jags, same thing. But for the Texans, pass rush is a really interesting component to this team. Jonathan Grenard's the guy in the picture, and he actually had some pretty nice moments last year. You also have Malik Collins, who's a nice inside disruptor. And maybe those are guys who continue to get better with more and more playing time at their disposal. But, you drive to Derek Stingley Jr. at number 3 overall. You're feeling a little bit better about that secondary. Still losing Justin Reed, and you could easily say that the secondary is a bigger concern. But if this team can find a way to generate some pass rush, I feel a little bit better about the defense. But, outside of Grenard having some moments last year and Collins, being solid, they don't have that J.J. Watt presence, right? And maybe I'm basing this off of what I have seen Houston have in the past. So that might not be fair. But if this team, bottom 5 in the NFL last year in sacks, if it's more of the same this year, I like Derek Stingley Jr., but he's really the brightest spot of that secondary. And if they can't generate pass rush, then that secondary is going to be left out to dry. So that's kind of my long-winded route to why I think the pass rush is going to be massive for this team, in all honesty. And I'm not saying Houston's going to win the Super Bowl if they have an elite pass rush or anything like that, but if they figure it out, and maybe Jonathan Grenard takes another step forward, whoever it may be, that could take this team to another level and maybe expedite this rebuild process a little bit. So if they can't get that pass rush, though, that secondary is going to be rough. That defense is going to be really rough as a whole. So then you get to the Colts and the Jags. They have the same thing. We'll start with the Indianapolis Colts here. So wide receivers, I put Alec Pearson here, mid-round pick, and a guy who I think could work in that offense, right? Especially if Michael Pittman's going to be your possession guy. Let's say he's working that 10 to 20 yard range, primarily living between the hashes over the middle of the field. I think that's a role that would be great for him. And then if Alec Pierce is your vertical threat guy, running a lot of goes, posts, comebacks, he's working that route tree. I think that's a nice way to build it off of one another. And then Paris Campbell working in the slot. He has a lot of speed, assuming he can stay healthy, which that's a big if. But I just worry about, I like Michael Pittman. He does feel like more of a 1B than a 1A type of guy, but nonetheless, we'll say Michael Pittman's a 1. Is Alec Pierce ready to take on a big role right away? I don't know. And also, that vertical route tree, is that really something that Matt Ryan can fully take advantage of? I mean, Matt Ryan is still solid, but doesn't have the arm that he once did, and he never once was a guy with this absolute howitzer for an arm. So that's interesting. And then also, what happens if Paris Campbell does go down, right? When Zach Pascal's not there, he's been a fine slot option in the years past for this team. So I'm just fascinated from wide receiver 2 onward. And there's a couple other teams that we'll talk about with something similar, but I'm just fascinated to see how that room shakes out. And this is a team that has star-studded players on the defensive side. The offensive line's great. We know we're going to be able to run the ball well with Jonathan Taylor. What can they do through the air? That's going to dictate if this team can one, be a serious playoff contender, and two, if they get in the playoffs, can they be a threat? Can they be scary? Can they win a playoff game? I think that's going to fall on the shoulders of the receivers. And then for the Jacksonville Jaguars, it's a little different because they're more in the camp of the Texans, where this team is not going to win the Super Bowl this year. Sorry, Jacksonville fans. But can they find someone to be that wide receiver one? And I put Laviska Shenault in this picture because, he was a guy I loved coming out of Colorado. He was one of my favorite receivers in that draft class, and it just hasn't come together yet. And, part of that's the Urban Meyer situation. Part of it, just, I don't know if they've known how to use him correctly. And maybe I also thought he had a little bit more route running prowess, and I thought he could be an X with the, yak and end around type of components that he can add into that. Maybe he's just kind of that gadget guy who works out of the slot. And if that's the case, okay, use him in that role then. We still haven't really even seen that. So this team just needs to find a one, especially considering this is year 2 Trevor Lawrence, right? And your emphasis, just like we talked about with the Dolphins and with the Jets earlier, you got to have that supporting cast around Trevor Lawrence, right? So they signed, Brandon Sheriff. They're trying to improve that offensive line. Made a couple moves at the wide receiver position. Zay Jones coming in, Christian Kirk, but are those two guys really like alpha number ones? Right now, we would have to say no, because we just haven't seen that from either one of those two. So can somebody take that step forward, become wide receiver one? Which one of these wide receivers will stick and be a part of, let's say in 3 years, the Jags are ready to make their playoff push, and maybe Trevor Lawrence is, playing like a number 1 overall pick, right? And they're ready to take that step and become a competitive team. Will they have how many of these wide receivers are a part of that roster, right? That's kind of the question I'm also wondering, right? 3 years' time, maybe we'll call it, which of these receivers is sticking in a part of that core that maybe will take this Jags team back in the playoffs and maybe make them serious threats inside the AFC. So still looking for that alpha wide receiver. And again, the emphasis has to be help out Trevor Lawrence. So that wide receiver room is going to be something I'm keeping my eyes on all year long. And then for the Titans, I know this is so vague, the offense in general. I'm sorry, but this team really does kind of concern me, especially when you lose an A.J. Brown who just gets open, and he's also just a yak machine. Again, I say this all the time. Ask the Ravens. I think they're still trying to tackle him and prevent him from getting the end zone. He's just a difference maker, and he can make offense simple. And I mean, Derrick Henry's in this picture for a reason, because he's the one thing I don't really worry about outside of his health. But if Derrick Henry's out in the field, he's going to be good. He's going to be good. That being said, the interior of the offensive line has, regressed over years. So how does that affect Derrick Henry? How many more tackles he's having to shed in the backfield, right? These are some of the components that make his life a little harder. He's, great at getting guys off of him, and he still makes, he still has a great yards per carry after contact. He's one of the best all time at that. But that being said, he is coming off an injury, and he's starting to he might be up and over 30 if my memory serves. You're trying to keep his job as easy as possible. So that interior offensive line is concerning, and then also, when will that playoff Ryan Tannehill show up? How much of him can he suppress that throughout the entire season and get back to where he was 2 years ago? Okay, good. If that's the case, great. But without a number 1 wide receiver, I'm having a harder time thinking that's plausible. And also, Robert Woods coming off of an injury. Can he play the entire season? Is he the same guy? He's really an interesting opponent because he's such a good run blocker that I think he kind of fits that team identity, and you'll probably see Derrick Henry running to his side a lot. And then, Treylon Burks. What does he look like as a rookie? What's his role? So if that pass game does take a step back, let's say Robert Woods can't stay healthy, or he's not the same guy, and Treylon Burks isn't ready for a full-time role, what does that mean? That means the passing game is going to get worse, it's going to regress, and it's going to make it that much harder for Derrick Henry, and teams can start loading the box, and they're going to make his life that much harder. And if Derrick Henry's life's that much harder, and you're having a hard time throwing it, that defense is really nice. And I talked about I liked that defense. That was my reason for optimism for this team. But their lives might be really, really tough. I could see this Tennessee offense taking a major step back this upcoming season. I hope not, Tennessee fans. I hope I'm wrong. But that is my concern. So vague, but hopefully I was able to get my point across. Okay, let's move on to the AFC West. So for the Broncos, no Vic Fangio, and I use this analogy in the reasons for optimism. So Fangio's gone, but they do have, a disciple of his, defensive ideology. You'll still probably see a lot of too high looks, probably a lot of cover 4 in there as well. But there is something to be said about not having, Peter, Timothy, and all the disciples doing Jesus' work, right? So there's a difference between Vic Fangio and one of those similar disciples. But going off of that with that secondary, it'll be interesting to see without Vic Fangio there, what does Patrick Surtain look like in year 2? Or, how do they, the matchup side of that, how do they try to protect him maybe? Especially in a division where you're still having to deal with a Kansas City offense that's anchored by, Patrick Mahomes. You're going to have to see Justin Herbert twice. You're going to have to see the Raiders and Devontae Adams and Derek Carr twice this season. So that's all really, really interesting. So Also, part of the reason I said no Vic Fangio is this roster is as good as it gets, too. So this, and we'll talk about one more team in the AFC North where the roster is so good that it's really hard to kind of find that one fatal flaw. And it may not even necessarily be a roster component. It might be some outside, effect. And in this case, moving from Vic Fangio to someone who's trying to be and emulate what Vic Fangio has done and is known for, could cause that defense to take a step back. Now, I think, bringing in Russell Wilson is a large enough step forward to where the defense can regress a little bit. But, how does that affect specifically the secondary? I'm fascinated to find out. Then for the Chiefs, this is such an easy one. I'm sorry, this is such a blatantly obvious one, but missing firepower. And really what I mean by this is anytime you watch Kansas City when they had Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes it was must-see TV because at any moment they could score. At any moment. And, MVS has downfield speed. And, there's still some big playability. I love Sky Moore. I think that was a great pick in the second round. Those guys just aren't Tyreek Hill, right? So does this offense still have that component to where you can't take your eyes off the TV as a fan? But on the field, as a defense, are you having to always, keep eyes in the back of your head, making sure Tyreek Hill's not behind you, right? So that's really interesting. But that being said, without that, maybe that trump card, if you want to call it that ability to score at any given moment, does this team have a little bit more well-balanced attack, right? They can go with the hot hand. Is it Juju? Is it Travis Kelce who's got the matchup we like? Whoever, maybe it is MVS, burning corners. He's got the step on him, whatever the case may be. So they may lose that ultimate, trump card. Hey, we can score in the blink of an eye. But maybe that ultimately works out better, and it allows Patrick Mahomes to get into an offense and can play into a rhythm. And maybe instead of one play drives, it's being comfortable playing 8 to 10 play drives. So not necessarily the end of the world, but losing that ability to just say, hey, fall asleep and we'll score in one play 80 yards. It doesn't matter. That is a powerful component you have in your hand, and it opens up a lot of other things too. So I'm again fascinated to see how that plays out. And then for the Chargers, Joe Lombardi, and I have criticized that offense a ton. I'm not the only person. When you have someone of the caliber of Justin Herbert, not only with what he's already accomplished, but just the tools, right? Cannon for an arm, enough mobility, can extend plays, can make big plays happen. Sometimes it's bewildering to where it's like, wow, they're running so much underneath. And I get it. Keenan Allen is not the most fleet of foot guy. He wins underneath. He is, especially when he's working at the slot. That's his bread and butter. Mike Williams is a downfield guy, but he's not necessarily the fastest dude. He's more of a 50-50 guy. You got to let him get down the field. Jalen Guyton's getting some preseason buzz, and he's getting some hype. That'd be exciting. And, he kind of has a little bit more of that downfield speed, and we've seen him make those big splashy plays. So I think it really comes down to Joe Lombardi. How do you maximize the arm of Justin Herbert? And kind of like we were talking about the Chiefs, can you find a way to get that trump card? Can you find a way to make defenses fear a 75-yard bomb, turning into a touchdown? Not necessarily 75 yards in the air, but you get my point. But can you add that in your offense, or is it going to be more of the same, this Joe Lombardi offense that, mirrors what Sean Payton was doing with, Drew Brees in New Orleans, with a quarterback that, Justin Herbert's great, Drew Brees is an all-timer. Their skill sets are completely different. I mean, that's trying to force a square peg through a round hole. So can Joe Lombardi adapt? Can he adjust? Can he add a little something to the playbook and, capitalize on what Herbert can do, specifically, beyond 15 yards down the field? That's something I have to keep my eye on this upcoming season. And then for the Raiders, really the secondary is still something that concerns me a fair amount. Bringing in Chandler Jones, him and Max Crosby, that pass rush could be special. But, Trayvon Mullen, is he ready to be cornerback one? Rocky Ya-Sin had some, maybe he had some moments, but, you talk to Colts fans, he's not somebody that they enjoyed or fell in love with, but not a beloved Colt during his tenure there in Indianapolis. So, what does he look like as a cornerback too? I do like Nate Hobbs. I think he had a great rookie year, and that's an awesome player to have in your nickel. But that being said, his role in that cover 3 Gus Bradley system is vastly different than what Patrick Graham's going to ask him to do this year. So how does that affect things? And then I really like Javon Merrick, but that's one safety out of 2 starters. So what does the rest of that group look like? So lots of question marks. I don't know if Trayvon Mullen is ready to take that step forward to be a cornerback one. He's been a solid player, but a larger role, not everybody's ready for that. Rocky Ya-Sin, will he live up to, the Raiders' expectations? And then, of course, Trayvon Merrick, what does he look like in year 2, and who's the starter playing next to him? So secondary, going to be a huge question mark, but this team does have the advantage of Max Crosby, Chandler Jones. Those guys are healthy. That's an awesome pass rush, and it'll make the job of the secondary just a little bit easier. Last division we'll talk about in the AFC side, the AFC North. So the Ravens wide receivers, I mean, I'm not, saying anything new here, right? And I'm a believer in Rashad Bateman. I think he takes that step forward and he becomes a clear-cut wide receiver one. I think that's part of the reason why, Hollywood Brown requests a trade and the Ravens oblige, right? You don't have to do that. Look at Deebo Samuel and the 49ers. They're working that out. If Baltimore really wanted to keep Hollywood Brown around, they would have. But I think one good business, you got a first-round pick and a pick that's 2 spots higher than you took Hollywood Brown in, and you don't have to pay him, $20+ million when he's ready to make that contract demand. I think Rashad Bateman also is a part of that component, and they're saying, hey, this guy's ready to be wide receiver one, and he is also aided by the fact, kind of like Kansas City, where if you're the number one wide receiver, you don't necessarily have to be target number one, right? Because you have a Travis Kelce. In Baltimore's case, it's Mark Andrews, who was awesome last year. So can Bateman be that number 2 target, but that guy who can win on the outside? He was a crisp route runner coming out of Minnesota. He's shifty enough. I think he can get the job done. My question really will be that big playability, because you open up so much with that running game, right? You're forcing safeties to come into the box, and then Hollywood Brown was, how you respond to that. All right, bring your safeties down. I'm going to let the fast guy get behind you. Simple enough. I was a big fan of Tylan Wallace coming out of Oklahoma State, but he did run in the 4.4s, I think 4.44 flat or 4.44 40. So not quite as fast. He kind of feels like he's when you watch his tape. But he's also a 5th round pick for a reason, right? He got passed on by all 32 teams 4 times. So is that somebody you can rely on to be that downfield burner? I don't know. Is it Devin Duvernay? Unsure about that. He's been more used as an underneath, gadgety, run after the catch and yak type of guy. So I don't know if he's cut out for that. So I think Bateman can be that number 2 target, number 1 wide receiver, but what about that deep play component as your run game is dictating more people in the box? Can you beat people over the top? That's something I'm keeping my eyes on. For the Bengals, this was that other situation that I was alluding to earlier where roster is really, really good. What is that fatal flaw? And maybe it's something that's away from the field. So this Jesse Bates situation has been really it's kind of a bad look for Cincy because they've done such a good job building that team, and in 2 years' time, going from a team that was at the bottom of the barrel, picking number 1 overall, you get a quarterback, you get Jamar Chase. Last year's draft, not this past one, but the one before that at 5, you're playing in the Super Bowl. And Jesse Bates has been a huge reason for this team's success and a big reason why they've been able to turn around. And in the playoff run last year when they went to the Super Bowl, he was awesome. Maybe the regular season was a little disappointing, but he was awesome in the playoffs. So he also just represents the heart and soul, it feels like, especially of that defense. So I think they'll get that contract done, and I'd be shocked if Joe Burrow's not in Duke Tobin's offense saying, hey, what do we have to do to get this done? He is a leader. He's an unbelievable player. There's no reason we should not be giving him a contract extension. I think it'll eventually get done, but why isn't it already? That's what's really peculiar about this. This was a no-brainer extension. It just hasn't happened. So all that is kind of concerning. But Duke Tobin's done a great job, and because he's the heart and soul and he's a great leader, I imagine teammates are going to put some emphasis and some fire into the ass of those in the front office to make this happen. But what if it doesn't? That's a leader, and he might be disgruntled if they move on from him. How does the locker room respond? But also, you may like Dax Hill, but starting a rookie there at free safety against or over one of the best of that position, that's a step back. No matter how much you like Dax Hill, that is starting a rookie in the place of one of the best players of that position. I'm sorry, it's gonna take a step back at least right away. So again, this makes no sense to why this contract hasn't been done, but at the same time, I can't see why the Bengals wouldn't get it done eventually. So this might even go by the wayside, and I might be down a fatal flaw on the Bengals. For the Browns, simple enough. I mean, I'm not going to talk about this long because I don't have a law degree. This is not an area of my expertise, and I don't know what the NFL was going to do when it comes to suspension. But this Deshaun Watson situation is really going to be what dictates, how good this team is, at least in year 1, with him being in Cleveland. If it's a year-long suspension, I'm almost wondering if Cleveland's trying to find a way to get Jimmy Garoppolo and have him run a Kevin Stefanski. It's very similar to that Shanahan brand of an offense. Have him just be the placeholder for a year. I think that's in the cards. But if it's not Deshaun Watson and it's not Jimmy Garoppolo, it's Jacoby Brissett. And that's just, if you have that for 17 games, no matter how good your roster is, that's gonna be a long road ahead of you. So obviously Deshaun Watson will dictate a ton of where this team goes, at least right away. And this is, even off that point, this is a team that has so much, the roster looks so clean, and they have a lot of players on team-friendly deals. That's going to change as these young players are getting off their rookie contracts and they start demanding more money. The cap space is going to become, thinner and thinner as we go on, especially when you have a quarterback who's going to be making $246 million fully guaranteed. So year 1 feels like the time to strike when the iron's hot for the Browns before that roster becomes harder and harder to keep together. So obviously this will dictate a ton this upcoming season. And the last thing we'll talk about, the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, Great pass rush. We talked about it earlier. TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, studs. You bring in Larry Ogunjobi. He's going to be your replacement for Stephon Tuitt after he retires early. Okay, I'm not really worried about that. A little concerned about the linebacker position, but Ahkello Witherspoon, Cam Sutton, Levi Wallace. These all feel like guys who maybe Wallace, you're fine with him being a 2. That's kind of what he was in Buffalo. But all these guys feel like, okay, yeah, I feel better about them if they're like my 3rd or 4th cornerback. That's 1, 2, and 3 right now. And then also, Terrell Edmunds back on a 1-year deal. He has been, much maligned by Steelers fans, and honestly, I think he's been picked on by a ton of teams. One whether he's playing deep and you're moving Minkah Fitzpatrick around the sticks, or if it's the other way around. So a lot of concern there in that secondary, and no matter how good that pass rush is, I go back to the Bengals game, the first time those two teams, went against one another, and it was in Pittsburgh. Joe Burrow didn't have to throw the ball about 20 times in that game, and tore up Pittsburgh, not even having to hold the ball long, because Jamar Chase was just cooking whoever was across from him. And I'm picking one of the best up-and-coming wide receivers, one of the best passing attacks in the NFL as my example. That might be a flawed argument, but that Pittsburgh secondary, right? Like, take some onus if you're a Steelers fan. Terrell Austin, now the defensive coordinator, has worked with his DB, so maybe he has what it takes to get another gear out of an Ahkello Witherspoon or, a Levi Wallace or Cam Sutton, whoever it is. And also takes solace in the fact Minkah Fitzpatrick's a stud, so gave him that extension for a reason. At least have him back there. Try to be the magic eraser. But man, that is a flawed cornerback room. And I could go offensive line here, but that's been talked about. You've heard that enough. So branching away from a little too obvious of a selection there, and also the quarterback position is going to be fascinating. But that secondary might be rough enough, we'll see, to mitigate one of the best pass rushers in football. And if that's the case, you take away what's special about that Pittsburgh defense. I have a hard time with what on the offensive side and potentially a rookie quarterback starting the majority of the season. I have a hard time seeing this team get over 500, which has been the Mike Tomlin staple. So that has been my biggest area of concern and potential fatal flaw heading into next year for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But that is going to do it for my fatal flaws for all 16 AFC teams. Tell me what you think down below in the comments section. What might hold back each of these teams? Your favorite team in here. Tell me what you think might be their fatal flaw this season. And if you think I got any of these wrong, love to have your thoughts all the same. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. It'll help me out a ton. If you're new around here, want to see more football content, just subscribe down below. That's going to do it for me. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.